Well, for those of you who didn't attend my first session, my name is Jean-Luc, and I'm a developer advisor. Came all the way from Canada. Flight was about 21 hours. Took a while to get here, but I'm really happy to be here. And I'll be talking to you about one of the topics that gets me the most excited. It's one of the most passionate topics. It's team system. And specifically, we're not going to dwell on what's available in Team System in 2005 or 2008, but we're going to start peeking into the future. So some of the information I'll provide you in this session is information that hasn't really been talked about too much, but it's publicly available. And if you want to play around with these new versions of Team System, you certainly can. So what are some of the developer issues that are out there right now? You have lack of communication in the team. Some people work in a software development environment where the main communication is by email or memos sent by paper. And the problem is there's so many types of communication you can have with the team that everything gets lost in the shuffle. So there might be an email that you sent to a developer saying, "Can you please fix this bug?" And then the developer, will be behind on his email and not get to it. So that's part of the communication problem. Slipping projects, the problem of trying to estimate how much time it takes to develop a project. Finding bugs in code, only discovering bugs at the end of a project. Lots of tools to integrate. So I've talked to many of you, and some of you are using tools from different vendors to maybe one tool for doing version control, one tool for doing builds, one tool for managing all the work items and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's hard to combine the information from one tool to the other. You have to export it to some format and then reintegrate into the other tool. So that can certainly be an issue. So from these issues, there's a bunch of different solutions that we can undertake. The one from Microsoft, the application lifecycle management tool that we have to manage all of these issues is Team System. And as you can see, there's a whole lot included, including extensibility. So Team System is built so that you can take the core product and use APIs to extend it. For example, if you like using a specific version control that has an API, you can trigger check-ins and checkouts from that version control from within Team System. You can integrate, say you have a different build provider, you can trigger builds from other providers within Team System. One of the great things about Team System is the task framework. There's a task called the generic task. So let's say you have a load runner. You're using that tool to do some testing. You can pull in the test data into Team System, and it will recognize it as the same kind of test data that you would have in any other built-in integrated test. Then we have web access. So the one cool feature is you can go online and actually create work items, check in the code, do builds, and so forth. And then essentially every single role is covered here. So we have architecture, development, testing, and database management. So I wrote a couple of books on Team System, and unfortunately I wasn't able to bring in a few copies. I think I'd have to bring several copies to give each one of you a copy. But actually, I have a standing offer. If you send me an email, I will send you a PDF of one of them. Okay? Yep. All right. So one of the big contributors to Team System, in writing the book, I had the pleasure of being able to work with different product teams, and this was even before I joined Microsoft. And this is Khushabu Sharan from the India Development Center. And her team developed Team Foundation builds and a lot of the really core features of Team System. And she helped me personally in writing some of the content in the book, making sure what I was writing made sense and was actually factually accurate. So here's a picture of them celebrating the release of Team System version 2005. So this is what Team System looks today. So we have the team suite with the architecture, development, task, and database. There's some good features there, modeling, you can do code analysis and so forth. And then within Team Foundation Server, you have version control, reporting, and BI. So what does the new version of Team System look like compared to this older version of Team System? Well, the new version, as you can tell, has way more features. And I don't expect you to be able to read all the little fine print. We're going to drill down into each one of the different versions, and I'm going to give you little short demos on what's included within the new version so you get a sense of what's happening. So some of the commonly asked questions about Rosario. The first one is, when is it going to be released? And frankly, we haven't provided a date yet. But you can download the latest bits, and so we have current April 2008 CTP. You can download it either as an ISO, which you can install on your own, or you can download it as a VPC. And the VPC is very good because it allows you to work within the environment without having to configure everything. Also included in the VPC are project walkthroughs, so you can walk through the process of setting up your architect diagrams, or setting up test case management, or so forth. Keep in mind that some of the things I'm talking to you about today may change, so don't get it in your head that what I'm showing you right now will be a permanent part of Rosario, as with any alpha or beta. Actually, CTPs are usually considered alpha version of the product. There may be a lot of changes, and what you see today may not end up in the final product. Again, who determines what ends up in the final product? It's you. One of the great things about this specific release is that the specifications that the product team uses, they publish them online for open review. So if any of you want to comment on specific features and say, oh, this doesn't make sense, why are you putting this in the product? Or, oh, this is good, but you definitely need to add this extra thing. This is your opportunity to put in that comment. So I put in a URL here. It's hard to read. It's snurl.com/29imu. And the slides will be posted online on the Developer Summit site. So you'll be able to reference this very easily. But anyways, it allows you to comment on these different things and also contribute feedback. And the one thing that the product team will do is absolutely listen to your feedback and to what you want integrated. So don't be. This has actually happened to me where I've contributed feedback for Visual Studio 2005 and it made it into the product. So I feel like I own a part of that, even though I didn't write the feature. So for developers, currently there's a whole bunch of different features. There's static analysis, profiling, code metrics, and cyclomatic complexity, which I really glanced and glossed over in the last session. But now there's a whole bunch of really cool new tools, including the historical debugger, which I'll give you a demo, the code analysis rule set, some test impact analysis, and the standalone debugger. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is launch Rosario and give you a little walkthrough. So this is the VPC of Rosario, and once you launch it, you'll notice that if I go into About Visual Studio, it's going to indicate that it's actually Visual Studio 2008. Because we haven't provided a name specifically. Oh, see, we covered it with Microsoft. One second. So the foundation of this release is that, and the one thing we've done is make it an incremental improvement every time we create a new product. So I'm going to load in this tool called Zoom It. Maybe if you'd noticed earlier in my presentation, I was able to magnify certain parts of the screen. So this application, Zoom It, is actually available off the Microsoft TechNet site. It's only 44K, and I'll show you what it does for those of you who didn't see it. I'm going to launch it and install it. If I do Control-1, I can then zoom into the environment. So, yeah, you see the icons are incredibly large. It's good for showing parts of the screen and making it more clear. So what I'll do here is open up Visual Studio, and I'm going to specifically open up a project, which is a healthcare project that was built. So I'm going to click Projects and Solutions, go on to my desktop. You'll notice there's a healthcare project right here, and something called Patient Monitoring. And this is an application that was built using WPF. So Rosario supports a lot of the different technologies that came out of 3.0 and 3.5, and much better support for that. So we're going to load in the project, and then I'm going to run it, and we're going to see what it looks like. And then we're going to use the historical debugger and also the standalone debugger to help us debug this application. So you'll notice the project has loaded up, and I'm just going to click on debug. So it goes through the build process. It succeeded. And you're going to get a WPF application popping up. And this WPF application is pretty cool because it provides visualizations on the patient, so you can see their EKG meter, you can see their breathing and other types of metrics. And on top of that, there's a lot more that you can do. You can also check out their patient records and also flip. So there's a really nice visualization here. You can flip from one view to another to the other. I'm just going to wait a few seconds for this to pop up. Okay, try it again. Ah, here it is. So here's the WPF application. So essentially, it's now monitoring Aaron Jespers, and as you can see, it's taking an EKG or ECG sinus rhythm. And what's really great is you can take a look at different settings, different types of metrics that he has for that specific patient. So I can click on other patients and pull up similar types of data. Just gonna wait a second. So as you can see, it just flipped and showed you that view. So what I can do now is click on patient details, and it's going to flip the window. And as you can see the picture of the patient and some of the metrics, some of the vital signs and so forth. So I'm going to keep clicking here. So there's Benaldi Rafaela, and it's going to pop up in a second. Here's Benaldi, and I'll click on Andrew Ciancini. Okay. Whoa. Okay, so the patient picture didn't show up for that reason, for some reason. So we need to debug this WPF application. And typically, if you want to debug an application in WPF, it may not be as easy as some other types of applications. But with the historical debugging facility, you can certainly do it. So I'll go under Debug Windows. Debug Windows. And you'll notice that there's a whole bunch of different options, including debug history. So I can click on Break into the Debugger, and it'll provide me with a history of all the different activities that were happening in the call stack in different parts of the memory. So if I expand this little part here, and I'm going to stretch this out and zoom in a little bit, you'll notice that the history actually captured an exception. And specifically, the exception was that it couldn't locate the resource/image/Andrew Ciancini. So there's a problem there. So you might be asking, well, what exactly can I configure the debug history to capture? And I'll click right here. And you can open some settings within Visual Studio to set all of this. And that feature of debug history is codenamed Proteus, just to give you a little sense of it. So you can set the sensitivity to whatever level you want. If you set it really high, it'll measure everything, so it'll get all the property getters and setters and so forth. And if I set it to medium, then it'll get everything from the low setting, including the call tree parameter values, and going to low, its breakpoints, exceptions, file events, and registry access events. So it acts kind of like, a little bit like application verifier, if any of you have used that product. It integrates it nicely into the product and gives you a live view of what's happening from a registry and an application process perspective. So, so what are some of the things we can do? So there's obviously a problem here. We can take a look at the project, and specifically where it says resources/image Anderson Cheney. So let's say you have a tester that's working with you, but that tester doesn't have Visual Studio. Then what do? It might be difficult for the tester to be able to do some debugging of this application. So what I'll do for now is I'll stop the application. And what you can do now is click on Debug, and you'll notice that there's an option here called Create Standalone Debugger. So I can click on Debugging and Create Standalone Debugger, and you'll notice that there's first the option of selecting a folder for the standalone debugger. So I'm just going to click New, and I'm going to create a folder for my tester. So I'm going to call it Tester. And I'm going to place some files in there. So I'm going to browse to that folder. Click OK. And you'll notice that it's copying a whole bunch of files into my debugger instance, into that specific folder. So if I open the folder, you'll notice that there's a bunch of DLLs and also this file called vsdebug.exe. So let's say we place this directory into a new environment. This is what the tester will receive. So it's a Visual Studio standalone debugger, and they can start a program, debugging a program, attach to a process, open a file, or so forth. So what I can do is I can actually run this to begin with. So I'm going to run the application. I'm going to go in here and attach to the process. That's great too. I like it. So you'll notice that we can, the list of all the processes that are running, so I'll just attach to this one. Okay. I'm already debugging it in the other instance. So what I would need to do, and in fact, this is the real scenario, right? The tester does not have the Visual Studio running. So what they would do is get a copy of the exe. So I'm going to go into my healthcare Avalon patient monitoring, into the bin directory, go to debug, and just run the application. So I'm running the application, and now I can attach the debugger to this process. It'll take a second, then I'll bring up all the processes, and I'll say, yes, attach. So I'm now attached to that process. And I can now click through different steps and go to Andrew Cheney. And if we go into here, we can take a look at different comments. So the problem is it's not coming up as a debug problem, but if I set a breakpoint within the project, I can, and within that exe, I can certainly pull it up here. So I could break and look at different threads as I'm going through the code. So that just gives you an idea of what that specific tool looks like. So let's actually try to fix the problem. I'm going to close the application. And take a look in here and go back into my historical view of my debugging. Second. So I'll go back into the patient monitoring, go to Andrew again. Click on this option. And go into the debugger. The exception is thrown, so what I can do is go to that specific historical point in time. And it's not jumping there, but anyway, it would just jump to the line of code. Okay. Anyways, you get the sense of what I'm talking about. Essentially, the problem in the application, if we take a look at it, is actually in the XML file. So what I'll do is go into the XML folder. And if we take a look at the test data, you'll notice that there's a listing of all the patients. In fact, that patient data is being loaded into the XML. And if we scroll to that patient that was an issue, you'll notice that the image is being pulled in through image andersoncini.ping. And what's the name of the folder here? You'll notice it's called images. So the issue was that a misnamed node in the XML. So simply by changing that specific thing to images, you'll be able to run the application again and see it running. So let's click on here. And finally, we can see the end result. I'm just going to click under here. And we're going to move on and check out some of the other features of Team System, brand new Team System. So there you go. You have the image popping up. So I'm going to close the solution and go back to my slides. So the next feature I'd like to talk about, or the role, is specifically in terms of testers. So currently there's a whole bunch of testing functionality in Team System, including performance testing, manual load, web, generic, and unit testing. And if you attend my session tomorrow, I'm actually going to provide you with these hands-on labs that you'll be able to walk through different test scenarios and try out the tasks yourself. So if you bring your laptops, I'll provide you with links to all the tools that you'll need in order to try out all this functionality too. So some of the new things that are available in Rosario include a whole set of tools for test case management. And another thing that's pretty cool is that in Team System, Visual Studio 2005 Team System, you were able to create manual tests. But essentially, in creating manual tests, you're simply filling out a Word document and running that. and then waiting for human response in order to click through these different steps and then approve whether that test was approved or not. In Rosario, you can enter the steps of your manual test and actually save it as a manual test that can be automated. And this is very similar to the web test, except it applies to now WinForm applications. One of the other cool things that correlates to this is also coded UI tests. So you can now test the WinForm UI and also apply unit tests to that UI also. So it provides you with a lot of really great functionality. Now, the UI testing and the unit testing off the UI isn't available in this specific build of Rosario. However, it's coming really soon. So in the next build or the build after, you should be able to test out that specific functionality. And finally, there's the test case manager, which is a really important component because that's what allows you to organize all your tests and to set up a whole plan for your testing system. And this was something you could set up yourself before. Essentially, what you would do is create test work items, and you could associate those to your to the tasks that you were setting up in within the a test project. Now, if the test passed, then it would resolve the work item, and you could also tie it into a build process and verify whether the test was running. And this provides a more cohesive, a better way of managing tests within the environment. So what I'll do here is I'm going to switch back into my VPC. And I'm going to close Visual Studio for the moment. And I'm going to show you a brand new tool that's been developed by the product team. And this is called Kamano. So it's Microsoft code name Kamano. And can anyone guess what technology was used to create this? WPF. Yes, you are correct. So essentially, as you can see, it has a really nice interface to start out with. And the first thing we need to do is to essentially connect to a team project. So what I'll do is click Connect to Team Project. As you can see, we have a variety of team projects to choose from. So I'm going to pick my Agile project and just connect to that. And so I believe I'm connected to Agile. See in a second. So next thing we can do is start the planning of our test. So we create by creating a new test case. I'm going to wait for the test case to open. And as you can see, the test case is very much set up very similarly to a work item. So what would be a good title for a test case? Everybody has a good test case title. The project name, okay. So I'm going to say this healthcare project. What would be a good test case for that healthcare project? Sorry? Verify the. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to say test the UI. But that's pretty generic. Pardon? Okay, so test the patient registration UI. A little more precise, but still pretty vague. But that's okay. So you'll see that I can add several steps to this test case. I can add a summary. We can add stories to this, so some documentation, links, attachments, and it'll also provide the automation of that test. So what I can do now is click here to add a step. So step number 1 would be open or launch the application. And what we can do is add an expected result. So what would be our expected result? No one? Okay. The application was launched, right? Okay, I know, it's the afternoon, we all ate. We're just kind of like, okay. So we launch the application, and then we'll click on patient record. So just to let you know, I'm just going to go through this very quickly, but if you download the VPC, you can run through an actual full scenario where you can try out the feature end-to-end. So let's say that's good enough for now. And I'm just going to save the test. So what I can do is after I've set up my test cases, I can now look at my test cases. So you can see a whole bunch that were set up with proper titles, unauthenticated users see link. And the test case looks very much like some of the test cases that were in that threat modeling tool that I demoed this morning. So after you've set up your test cases, then you may want to set up a new test configuration. So I'm going to go here. And so what would be our test configuration? Well, I'm using Windows Server 2008. I'm going to say Windows Server 2008. Just say that. Another thing we can do is go here and manage the test suites. So as you can see, there's a new test suite, and I can essentially add tests to that suite. So what I'll do is right-click here, and hold on a second. I'm going to create a brand new suite. I'm going to call this the Healthcare Suite, Test Suite. So you can add cases to that suite. So I'm going to add specific tests in there. And you'll notice that I can select this Healthcare Test Patient Registration. That. And then we can create a test plan. So our test plan would be test all healthcare applications. Then you can set up a description. So I'm just going to copy and paste the original name. Then you can set put some settings for the test. So I'm just going to say I want new test settings. You can select what iteration you want to go with. So the iteration 0. You can set whether your test plan is in progress and so forth. So this is a planned test plan. And you could also set things like the calendar date of when that test plan is supposed to be undertaken. So I'm going to say it's starting today, and my test plan will end, actually it set a pretty good date on May 26th. So as you can see, I can now provide a name for my test plan. For the test pass, so I'll call it maybe test pass number 1, and call it iteration. Iteration 0. Now I can select that suite I created earlier on. So I can select the new dynamic test suite. I can set the configuration, so it could either be a default test configuration or my specific configuration. I can use my test settings and put the state of the test at initial state. So it's in progress. So now I've set up all the infrastructure. So I have my test plan, which includes all the test suites that contain all the test cases, and test cases that contain all the tests. So it's pretty highly structured here. Then we can go into testing itself. So I can look at all my test cases and select them, and I can modify and so forth. You'll notice that in terms of defects, I can create new bugs and manage queries. and I can create reports for this. So once you create the task, you can run another tool called the test runner. And the test runner, what it'll do is launch this side tool, which I'll try to launch right now and show you. And it'll provide you with a way of running your test very much like the web test tool that you would have used in Visual Studio 2005 or 2008. So I'm going to look at all my test plans. Hold on a second. So, hold on a second. Here. So it gives you a little bit of an idea of what the tool looks like. And like I said, I encourage you to download the VPC, try to go through each step in trying out this tool. And if you try it out tonight and you come tomorrow and you tell me, look, this is not working for me, just let me know and I'll bring your feedback back to the product. So I'm going to close this for the time being, and I'm going to move back, and we're going to take a look at some of the other features in this area. So the next one is architects. When you were looking at Team System in 2005 and 2008, it was a very good tool. The architecture part was interesting, because it would provide some value, but maybe not as much as we would have hoped. So what you can do is set up an application diagram of your application architecture. The thing is, it was missing a couple of different types, like BizTalk servers. You couldn't add BizTalk servers. We included what was called an SDM SDK, which would allow you to write system definition models. Unfortunately, they didn't plug in as nicely into Team System as we would like. And but what you could do is set up the application infrastructure. You can load in the settings from IIS, so it very successfully was able to pull in those settings. You could do the validation and use the validation to do that kind of testing. And it also had the class modeling functionality, which was also very useful. Now, the team for the architecture tools has gone back to the drawing board in some sense to try to really provide some good value here. And one of the key things that's included is the ability to create really well-formed UML diagrams and then convert those into code. So that whole process of modeling to code has been realized. So we have different types of diagrams that are brand new in Rosario, including the sequence diagram, which is very useful, the activity diagram, component diagram, use case diagram, which is the UML diagram, and also a new tool called the Architecture Explorer, which will allow you to switch from one view to the other, and also generate diagrams based on things like executables from your code. So what I'll do here is I'm going to go back into my VPC environment and just show you a little bit of some of those different diagrams. Hold on a second. Okay. In the meantime, is there any questions so far about any of the stuff I've shown? Yes?
About the constants which are defined for the you set up with the debugging history, is there constants defined with those? Because in essence, if I want to debug with the history also, it's going to cost me a lot of memory. So is there a way to disable that?
Yes, you can disable the debug history in the same console where you set a very high, low, or medium. Oh, so high, medium, low, or none. Right? And you just set it to none and it won't capture that. So data collection through @verifier or through this new tool is actually quite transparent unless you have a very memory-intensive application or an application that will that every ounce of memory will count. And if you're running a .NET application, usually the management of that is through the garbage collection facilities. So you shouldn't see that much of an impact using the tool.
And is this debugger also available on professional edition?
So the next question was, is debugger available in the professional edition? And so far, that debugger, the standalone debugger, or the historical, is very specific to Team System currently. But we haven't announced any of the features of the next version of Visual Studio. So your guess is as good as mine right now. Any other questions? Yes. So the standard debugger, can you repeat the end?
Can I use it for remote debugging? Remote debugging is my application is running on a different server.
Okay.
I'm in a different box. Can I debug it?
That's interesting. Well, let's launch the debugger and let's see.
Most of the time we create scenarios, but the server is down, IDS server. There's an exception to an IDS server.
So there's documentation actually for this debugger. And you can attach to any given processor file. Let's see. Yeah, it appears, just based on just cursory look, it appears that the process has to be running on the same machine. There's no attached or remote process. But like I said, this is very early days, and if you think the standalone debugger has to be able to connect to remote processes, then send that feedback in to the link I provided you, and who knows, if it appears, then you can claim that you're the one who added remote debugging in the standalone debugger. But there's also documentation in the debugger, so please feel free to look at that. There may be some hidden feature where you can set up the remote mode. So what I'll do here is I'm going to launch Visual Studio. And I'm going to do File New Project. And oh, by the way, so essentially at the end, I'm going to ask 10 questions. And whoever